Today I want to talk about staples, not putting them in, but taking them out. Now surely staples have no place in the DAS bookbinding world of traditional bookbinding. As it turns out, staples are a fast and cheap way of binding pamphlets, ephemera, stuff that isn't supposed to be kept, but is and then becomes collectible and valuable. So I won't rule out looking at staples in the future. Putting them in, I mean. But today it's about removing staples, and there's no place for the staple remover in this video, except to remove the staples from our local rag so it can be used as waste for gluing out. Staple removing devices are far too damaging to paper for the work I'm going to demonstrate. This video is about removing staples carefully. Now you're thinking I still haven't answered the question of why I want to remove staples. In a future video, I will demonstrate binding a series of pamphlets into a single binding using a technique called a label binding. This is a potentially useful way of combining a heap of loose pamphlets into a book, which results in minimal damage to the original pamphlets. But most of those pamphlets will have been stapled, and those staples need removing carefully. I love terminology as much as the next person, and I'm sure you do too. So let's quickly look at how to describe a staple. A paper staple is made of a piece of wire, the thickness of which is its gauge, the top flat area is the crown, and the pieces that go through the paper and are bent over are called the legs. Removing staples is straightforward. It's often a job that volunteers are trained to do at historical societies and archives. I've done some research to make sure what I'm going to describe is consistent with the conservation or archivist world, and there are links in the description to some documentation by places like the National Archives and the NEDCC. But still, as always with my advice, caveat emptor. We need to remove the staples without causing any damage or any new damage to the paper. Step 1 is to bend up the legs to vertical, and step 2 is to remove the staple. To bend up the legs, I'll use a thin flat tool called a micro spatula to slide under each leg and with a twisting motion lift the leg up. Obviously I do each leg one at a time. It's important to twist the micro spatula so that the downward force on the crown is at the base of the leg. The 3 steps when the paper is likely to get damaged is when you push the micro spatula under the legs, as you twist the legs up to vertical, and as you pull out the staple. Let's look at how to avoid damaging the paper. Most of the published guides recommend using strips of thin polyester film, often known as mylar, to protect the paper. It needs to be thick enough to have some structural integrity, but thin enough to get under the staple. The guides recommend polyester because it's archival, and most conservation labs will have it in stock. But this is going to have a very short contact time with the paper, so any rigid, thin plastic should be fine. Thin, rigid plastic from waste packaging is great. They suggest using it on either or both sides. I cut pieces with a slight taper so that it's about the width of the staple halfway along. But here's the thing, most staples are well and truly embedded into the paper. It's next to impossible to get that piece of polyester between the paper and the staple. So I put the polyester up against the staple to protect the paper and use the micro spatula to lift the legs just enough to get the polyester under them. Now the paper is protected as I push the micro spatula under the legs. The next potential damage is while lifting the legs. As you twist the legs up, the crown will be rotated into the paper and will try and tear through. A bit of downward force over the crown will stop this. You can use your fingertip or another tool such as a knife blade or another micro spatula. Another piece of polyester film under the crown on the other side would also protect the paper if you can insert it. The final step is pulling the staple out. Again, damage can be done, especially if the staple is rusty. With a nice clean staple, you can push the micro spatula under the crown and lift the staple out. Once there's a bit of space, you can again protect the paper with a piece of polyester, but often the staple doesn't want to come out easily. If the staple doesn't want to come out, it's a good idea to cut the legs off with wire side cutters. If you are doing a lot of this work, flush cut electronic side cutters are perfect. I often use a piece of polyester with a slit in it to protect the paper. I push this down over the legs of the staple and cut off the legs as low as possible. Once both legs are cut off, the staple usually pulls out easily from the crown side. If there is still resistance, Lawrence Town in his book suggests removing the inside folios one at a time. And if, after a few of the folios are removed, there is again some resistance, retrim the legs and repeat until the crown comes away easily. Just make sure to keep the folios in the correct order if you're using this approach. So far, I've assumed the pamphlet and the paper are in good condition and the staples are not badly rusted. But if you live in a humid climate like Brisbane, many of the staples you come across will be badly rusted and the paper around them will be stained, or worse, completely deteriorated. Here is an interestingly difficult staple removal problem. The pamphlet is rather thick, so thick that putting in the second staple failed, and so they hit it again, mashing in another staple over the top of the first. These are fairly heavy-duty staples too. This book is going on 80 years old. The outer cover is showing signs of deterioration due to acidity, which I'll test with a small mark in an out-of-the-way place with a test pen. And it really doesn't want to flatten out, so I'm not going to force it, which could damage the paper. I'll use a brick as a support while working on it. Because of the thickness of the paper, I won't even try pulling the staples out. Once the legs are folded up, I'll cut the legs of the staples off and remove folios one at a time from the centre. Rust-affected paper is a video in itself, and I'm not really qualified to make it, so I'm just going to give you my 5 cents on the subject. The first thing to do when you come across bad rust staining is to give a big groan and just get it out of your system, because you're not going to get the rust out of the paper. No matter how much you want it to be so, there is no non-conservation lab, low intervention solution for rust stains. If you use one of the folk or old-time traditional methods of reducing the appearance of the rust stains, you'll probably do long-term damage. It doesn't matter how many people on the internet tell you these are fine, they aren't. Do not build up expectations with clients that you can fix rust stains unless you're a professional paper conservator, in which case you wouldn't be watching this video. Some of you know that I'm a physicist by training, so chemists should cover your ears now. The red rust, which is causing you grief, is caused by the reaction of iron with oxygen in the presence of the catalyst water, usually in the form of humidity. This ferric iron compound is insoluble in water and organic solvents, and it gets worse. The rust doesn't just sit on the surface of the paper, it gets into the cellulose matrix. To get rid of a stain that has gone into the paper, you would ideally apply a solvent that the stain bonds to, and the solvent and the stain is removed from the paper by washing or maybe using something like a suction table and blotters. In the case of an iron stain, the professional conservator would first have to convert the insoluble ferric iron into a soluble ferrous iron using a reducing agent, and then use a chelating agent to bond to the ferrous iron and then remove the resulting compound as mentioned previously. The reducing agent that was used in the past for this process was extremely dangerous, being prone to spontaneous combustion, which is dangerous for people and bad for paper. And now I think thiourea dioxide is mostly used, as it's much safer. Maybe you see the problem for the home conservator. Could the news get any worse? Well, it does. Rust oxidizes cellulose fibres. It causes the embrittlement of paper and ultimately its destruction. Red rust absorbs moisture, which causes it to swell and flake off. A tiny piece of rust can result in a horrible red blotch somewhere on the paper, nowhere near the rusting staple. So rusting staples have to go and the paper should be surface cleaned. If the staple is very rusty, don't pull the leg through the paper. It will scrape the rust off the legs and potentially grind the rust particles into the paper around the hole. Cut the legs off if they're very rusty. I'll finish the video here. I'll try and get back to how I deal with rust-stained paper, maybe in another video. This will require a discussion on the concept of reversibility and why I think it's often misunderstood or misused. I know removing staples is a basic procedure, but I hope you found something useful in this video. Once I get back into the swing of things, we'll look at some more substantial bookbinding again. As always, I really appreciate you hitting the big thumbs up button. If you're able and want to, you can support the making of more videos like this through Patreon or with a one-off contribution. If you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button and select the notification bell. Until next time, cheerio.